I'm already losing daylight really quickly. Hopefully I can get through this before it's pitch black. Fingers crossed. Hi, it's Isabel, and today's video is a really exciting one, at least for me, because I am going to talk about my favourite books of 2020. And I have decided to do this in two parts. In today's video, I am going to talk about all of my non-fiction favourites, and in tomorrow's video, yes, you're getting two videos in 2 days, so in tomorrow's video I will talk about all of my fiction favourites. But as I said, today I just wanted to focus on non-fiction because I have read some really good non-fiction books this year, and somehow they never really end up getting into my top 10 if I just do a top 10 on its own. So I wanted to give them their own video because I really want to talk about them and recommend them to you because they were some amazing books. So let me just jump right in, and I think I'm gonna talk about them in order of when I read them. I only have 3 to talk about, so this will probably be a bit of a quicker video than tomorrow's video. The one that I want to start with is Erebus by Michael Palin. And you probably expected to see this one here because I've talked about it quite a few times already on the channel, and I read this, I think, pretty early in the year, but it has really stayed with me ever since. So, as I've said a few times, but I'm just gonna say it again, this book is the story of the ship Erebus, and Michael Palin tells the story from when the ship was built all the way to when it disappeared on an Arctic exploration mission, and also to when it was found again only a few years back. You follow the ship on its many voyages that it went on, and it was used a lot as I said, a kind of exploration ship. So there was one really major voyage to the Antarctic that was very successful, and then there was a not so successful voyage, a very famous one with this ship, to the Arctic, the Franklin expedition, and basically everybody in that expedition just disappeared. And it was kind of a mystery what exactly happened to the expedition for a long time, but they have, a few years back now, found the ships again, and they have given kind of clues of what might have happened. And Palin also from those clues kind of describes that voyage and what probably happened to that exploration team. I really like reading about scientific explorations. I find them really interesting, and I also just like thinking about the times when it was still possible to find completely new things on Earth, like the Arctic and the Antarctic hadn't been explored yet kind of properly at that time, which is why they even went on these journeys. That's somehow just really fun to read about, in my opinion. And also the way Michael Palin describes all of these journeys and just his style of writing is really enjoyable, because I think it really feels like he's just telling you this story of this ship, and it's really well written and yeah, just fun to read. So if you're looking for some non-fiction that feels more like somebody is just telling you a really interesting story, I can really recommend Erebus. My next non-fiction favourite also has to do with stories, but in a very different way, because it is Monster, She Wrote, and the subtitle is The Women Who Pioneered Horror and Speculative Fiction, and it was written by Lisa Kröger and Melanie Anderson. And this one, as the title suggests, is all about the women who have written horror and speculative fiction throughout history that have often been forgotten or kind of put to the side because their male contemporaries were kind of more famous or are more remembered. But this book collects all of these brilliant writers that you might never have heard of, but that have definitely written some really interesting things and also have just moved the whole genre forward. And there are so many stories and writers that I have added to my mental TBR thanks to this book, because the way they talk about all of these writers and these stories is that each writer gets kind of a chapter that's like 2 or 3 pages where they describe the author's life and their work more like in general. But then at the end, they also put a little like reading recommendations list where they tell you where you should start with that particular writer, or like their most famous works, or kind of the ones that were the most influential. And I think that's a really clever way to do it, because that really gives you an idea of, if you want to get more into these stories and horror fiction written by women, it really gives you a place to start. This one has so many brilliant writers in it. As I said, it has some of my favorites like Mary Shelley and Shirley Jackson, but it also has a lot of writers that I didn't know of before. And I really love it when books like these tell me about more writers that I want to check out. And the book is also really cleverly structured, with like separating the writers into kind of time periods and kind of sub-genres that they write in. And it's also beautifully illustrated throughout. You can kind of see it on the cover, and all of these illustrations kind of reappear throughout the book. So it's just a completely well done book, from the illustrations to the text to what they actually talk about. So just to give you some examples, I especially like this page here, for example, where it tells you in a kind of sarcastic way what a gothic novel looks like. They also have some quotes pages, so for most of the writers they have like one like particular quote from a story that they also talk about and recommend. And it also has little illustrations to go with the text and the stories that they talk about. And oh, I just saw here, this is my list that I made of books that I want to read because they were recommended in this book. So yeah, as you see, I really enjoyed reading this and like going through the list of writers that I might want to discover for myself, and I think it's a really good resource as well as a fun read. And now I feel like I'm really starting to repeat myself, so let me just tell you, please go and read it, and I will move on to my last non-fiction favourite of the year. The last book I want to talk about is one that I've read very recently, and it is Beneath the Night by Stuart Clark. Again, I think I've talked about it before, but it is basically a history of humanity's relationship with the night sky. So Stuart Clark tells you everything from early humans to how tribal societies interacted with the night sky, to like the blossoming of civilization, to kind of our modern understanding, also now that we actually have the possibility to leave Earth and explore space, how that has changed our relationship with the sky and the stars. And I find it very, very fascinating. I've always been fascinated kind of by looking up at night and looking at the stars, and it's just somehow comforting to know that humans basically always have done that and have been fascinated by the stars and have tried to come up with explanations and have kind of used them for guidance, for navigation, for spiritual things and religion. Yeah, I'm somebody who totally loves learning about kind of early human history and things like that, so it was completely the perfect book for me. And the first time round that I read it, I have actually listened to it as an audiobook, which again was really nice because it really felt like the author was just kind of telling me about all of these things. But I have since purchased a physical copy of the book, and I have found out that it actually has a lot of illustrations and pictures to go with the text, so I'm really looking forward to hopefully rereading it at some point in the future and looking at all of the illustrations together with the text. And I think that I would get even more out of it that way. And those were all of the books I wanted to talk about today, my top 3, so to say, non-fiction books of 2020. As I said, stick around if you want to see my fiction favourites that I will post tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching, and I will hopefully see you in my next video. Goodbye!